Shalom. I want to start off by giving all glory and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and peace and salutations to the hopeful elect who are continuing to fight and teach this thing of ours in truth and sincerity. I'm the brother Manatazak with GMS Ancient of Days in Los Angeles, currently teaching with the Akim in Sherman Oaks. And today, through the Spirit, I want to get into a lesson that's titled The Return of the House of David. And I felt that this lesson was appropriate through the Spirit because here you have Genesis, the group Genesis, headed by priest Hakah and brother Hassad, once again changing the doctrine, the new flavor of the week, basically saying that there were heathens in King David's army, specifically part of his mighty men. Okay, and that's a false narrative. Okay, because King David, while he was on the scene, was putting these heathens to flight, subduing them, and putting them under captivity. Okay, so by the time that King Solomon took the throne, all the enemies had been overtaken and had put into subjection under Israel. And there were no heathen nations subscribed to the armies, okay, the military, okay, of the Israelites. All right. So what I want to do through the Spirit is just go into the house of David and their importance in end time prophecy. Okay. And how they represent the chosen royal line. Okay. Now, through the Spirit, first and foremost, the house of David, okay, represents the righteous royal lineage that the Most High Yahweh Shem Shai established forever through King David. Okay, and we know through the Spirit that the Lord is only dealing with and has only ever dealt with his chosen nation, the Israelites, 12 tribes, which can be identified primarily today as you so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, and so-called Native Americans. Okay, now we know, pursuant to the curses, that our nation has been spread across the globe and has mingled with every nation under the sun. So it stands to reason that here in these last days, you're going to have Israelites that come back into the fold looking like these other nations and speaking the languages of the nations they've been scattered to. Okay, but that still does not make them a heathen. Okay, if their seed line through their father goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is the point. Okay, just because you live in a heathen land does not automatically make you a heathen. Okay, because if that was the case, one of the examples I like bringing out is the famous actor and comedian Martin Lawrence. You know, he had his own TV show, Martin. You know, he starred in movies like Bad Boys and, you know, Blue Streak and, you know, things of that nature. But the point is, he was born in Germany. Okay. And he's considered a German American. But when you look at him, obviously he's a Jake of the Southern Kingdom. So just because you were born in another country doesn't make you of that nationality. It just means that's the lands that you hail from. Specifically speaking about Uriah the Hittite. Okay, just because he was from those Canaanite lands does not make him a Canaanite. He was an Israelite living in those lands. Just as we who have woken up to this truth are Israelites living in Babylon the Great, even though this nation of Babylon, America, isn't our homeland. Okay, so the point is, there were many mighty men, many men in the nation of Israel, specifically under King David, that were from various lands, but they were Israelites. Okay, now this house, the house of David, okay, it's not just about bloodline. Okay, it's about rulership, kingship, and most importantly, the everlasting covenant that the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai made with King David, who was an Israelite. And we're going to begin through the Spirit in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 7. Okay, and Lord willing, this lesson is edifying to the hopeful elect. This is 2 Samuel, chapter 7, beginning at verse 12. It says, "And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom." Now, this is going into a prophecy about the righteous rulership that will continue on after King David has passed away. Okay, now this seed that he set up after King David, this is talking about King Solomon. Okay, because it says that this seed shall proceed out of his bowels, meaning this is going to be of his lineage. And King Solomon was the one to take up the throne after King David. But through the Spirit, King Solomon is also Yahushai. Okay? Verse 13, it says, he shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Because during this chapter, I believe, King David desired to build a temple for the Most High, but the Most High basically told him he had too much blood on his hands. So Solomon was the one that erected that temple, okay, in his stead. So this is what it's speaking about. Verse 14, it says, I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Now, this is the key that this is speaking about Yahushai, because this particular judgment never befell King Solomon. Okay? Now, he went off in his old age by worshiping the other gods of the nations, but he was never chastened with the rod of men and stricken with stripes of the children of men. That is a judgment that specifically happened to Yahushai. So when Yahushai was on that cross, when it says he atoned for his sins, he was atoning for his sins in his previous life, okay, because he had different incarnations. Okay, we understand that he was Adam, he was Melchizedek, he was Isaac, okay, and we're talking about the sins he committed when he was King Solomon. Okay, so Yahushai, yes, he went on the cross to redeem the sins of the hopeful elect, but his sins were included with that as well. Not when he was on the scene as Yahushai, because he fulfilled his lot in perfection, but it was during his other incarnations. Okay, for those of you that can understand through the Spirit, with the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Now, verse 15, it says, but my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. And this is important to note, because verse 15 says how the Lord took his mercy departed from King Saul. And that's important because here in these last days is the reestablishment or the continuation of the house of David versus the house of Saul. Okay? And this is what you're seeing play out before you now. Okay? Now in verse 15, or in verse 12, as we read, that seed is ultimately speaking about Yahushai, okay, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus, okay, because he also descends directly from King David according to the flesh, thus fulfilling that everlasting covenant. Okay? Let's get on Romans 1 and 3. Let's see here. This is the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 3. And it reads, concerning his son, Yahushua Mashiach our Lord, which was made of the seed of David according to the flesh, and declared to be Son of the Most High with power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead. It says, by whom we have received grace and apostleship for obedience to the faith among all nations. Okay? For his name, among whom are ye also called of Yahushua Mashiach. It says, to all that be in Rome, beloved of the Most High, called to be saints. Grace to you and peace from our power, our Father, and the Lord Yahushua Mashiach. So this is basically, when you're reading this in this book of Romans, this was an epistle that Apostle Paul wrote to the Israelites living in Rome. Okay, and the proof of that is that in verse 5, when it says all nations, people get tripped up and think that this is speaking about every nation under the sun, but it's not. Okay, because that all nations in the Greek, okay, goes to the Greek word ethnos, okay, meaning of the same ethnicity. Okay, so you know right then and there that Apostle Paul is writing to the Israelites. And in verse 7, it further solidifies it because it says those called to be saints. And we know in order to be a saint, pursuant to the definition, you have to be amongst the nation that made a covenant with the Lord by sacrifice. And only the Israelites did that. And you can get Psalms 148, okay, to prove that point. Okay, so this is only speaking about the Israelites. So the house of David is prophetic, okay, because the dynasty of the Lord Yahweh Shem Hashai the Lord basically promised would rule Israel forever. Okay, and of course it started with King David. It continued through King Solomon, and it ultimately culminates with Yahweh Shai, who is the King of Kings. Okay. Now, going into the house of David rising again. Okay, when the house of David fell, like after the kingdom split, the northern and southern tribes were divided. Okay, you basically had the Hispanic tribes and the so-called Negro tribes, for want of better. Okay, but prophecy says that in the last days, that same royal house will rise again to power through the elect men of Israel. Okay, and let's get Amos 9 and 11. Amos 9 and 11. Okay, the headline reads, Restoration Promised. It says, in that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David, okay, that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. Okay, and this is important because when it goes into that tabernacle of David, that basically means the government of the kingdom of heaven that's being reestablished. Okay, the house of David equals the elect, and the elect are going to, in this case, the 144,000 men from the 12 tribes of Israel. They are the governing body. Okay, pursuant to Revelation 7, verses 4 to 8, that 12,000 men out of each tribe. Okay, they are the governing body, those righteous rulers, those righteous kings and priests that's going to rule in the kingdom under King David and under Yahweh Shai. Okay. Let's get our next precept. Because you got people that are the leaders of these groups, I should say, outside of GMS that are trying to, usurp authority and create these lofty titles for themselves. Ultimately, the order has already been set, okay, from the foundation of the world, and everyone's basically going to fall in line in their lot. Okay, we should just be focusing on making it because everything is already set up. Okay, and the order that Yahweh Shai has set up, okay, once established, will not be usurped or succeeded by another. So it doesn't matter what title you call yourself here. What matters is what rank you have in the kingdom. And ultimately, if you are a part of the elect, which we're all fighting for through the Spirit, or at least we should be in truth and sincerity. Let's get the book of Jeremiah, chapter 30, verse 9. And it reads, But they shall serve the Lord Yahweh Shemashai their power, and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Further highlighting the importance of King David. Okay, and we know through the Spirit who King David is. Okay, in this reincarnation, he came back as King Masha. And this isn't a doctrine that we teach. This is something we believe through the Spirit. Once again, for those that have eyes to see and ears to hear, because a lot of us that believe this never met the man or broke bread with him or held the line with him. Okay, but we believe through the Spirit, okay, in the testimony of our apostles and elders, that this man was King David when he was on the scene. Okay, now Jeremiah 30 and 9, okay, that's a twofold prophecy. Okay, David himself will be resurrected and take part in the kingdom, but it also points to Yahweh Shai, who carries David's throne forever. Okay, now as I mentioned before, let's get into the house of David versus the house of Saul, because this is actually playing out before our very eyes. Okay, and the scriptures also mentioned this in the last days, that there would be a spiritual war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And what that basically means is the false teachers, the wicked Israelites versus the true prophets and the elect of the Lord. Okay. Let's get 2 Samuel 3 and 1. Second Samuel 3. Chapter 3. 2 Samuel chapter 3, beginning at the top. And it reads, Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. And this is the Spirit, because season 2 of the house of David just finished. And, I implore all Akim to check out that series, The House of David, seasons 1 and season 2. are out to be viewed in its totality, and it's a very well-made series through the Spirit. For those that have the time to watch it, because when we first come into this thing, and I'm talking about Great Millstone specifically, when we cross the line, when we get our homework assignments and our study assignments, one of the first things we're tasked to do is go through the old stories to learn our history, okay, and the wars and the battles that were fought, okay, so we can learn the temperament of our men and really put ourselves in the mind of the things that were going on to establish our kingdom. And as Apostle Gabar says through the Spirit, in order to learn the mystery, in order to know the history, you have to learn the mystery. Or in order to understand the mystery, you have to learn the history, roughly paraphrasing. And we know through the Spirit that Yahweh Shemashai reveals his secrets to the servants, the prophets. So as you go through these stories and you put yourself there, okay, it really comes to life. Okay, and it's very important to get the context, okay, of how Israelite ruled. Okay, and they had no mercy towards the heathen. Okay, and the same holds true all the way to this day. So when King David is risen up, there's going to be no heathen standing side by side with King David and the mighty men and the elect. They're going to go back to that warlike spirit and subdue these heathens, just as prophecy says is going to happen. Okay? So the same thing is happening today in terms of the house of David versus the house of Saul. Okay, and the house of Saul represents the 2/3 of Israel and the false camps that reject prophecy and deny Yahushai and basically push forth false doctrine, which we're starting to see now at an all-time high. So in contrast, the house of David represents the elect, the brothers laboring in truth, pushing the 100% doctrine, and ultimately calling on the true names of Yahweh and Yahushai and standing firm in their faith. Okay, and as we read in 2 Samuel 3:1, just as King David's house waxed stronger, okay, the true men of the Lord, okay, are growing in power and wisdom through the Spirit. Okay, while the false ones are fading out and regressing. Okay, and if you're moving in the Spirit, you should be able to note and to see who this applies to. Okay, now when it comes to the throne of David, Yahushai, he's ultimately going to sit on King David's throne because he's actually over King David. But King David is the king over Israel. But there's an order to things. Okay, and the prophecy goes full circle with Yahushai returning to claim the throne when he cracks those skies and subdues these nations. And that's going to happen in this lifetime because that throne is literal. Okay, rulership. Let's get the book of Luke, chapter 1, beginning at verse 32. And it reads, let's see. Actually, I'll begin at verse 31. It says, "And behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Yahushai." Okay, he shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord power shall give unto him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. Of his kingdom there shall be no end. All right, so that goes to prove that this throne is literal. Okay, the rulership, the government over Israel, okay, and the nations. This is going to take place in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so when Yahushua returns, he's going to sit upon that throne, and the house of David, the elect, will rule under him as kings and priests. Okay, so basically King David is the second in command under Yahushua. If you want to look at the hierarchy, and then you have the rest of the 12 and the rest of the 144,000 in their respective lot. Okay, let's get Revelations 5. Next precept, Revelations 5 and 10. And it reads, "He that believeth on the Son of the Most High hath the witness in himself." Oh wait, no. Well, actually, that's a good one too. That's not what I wanted. This is 2 John 5 and 10. It says, "He that believeth on the Son of the Most High hath the witness in himself. He that believeth not the Most High hath made him a liar, because he believeth not the record that the Most High gave of his Son." And that wasn't part of this lesson through the Spirit, but it's the Spirit the Lord had this come out, because you have people, or you have Israelites that have woken up to who they are, that still denounce the validity, okay, and the power of the only begotten Son. Okay, we are to worship Yahweh Shai. Now we understand that there's an order, as it says in Corinthians, that you have the Most High Yahweh, then you have Yahweh Shai, who's in a tier, in a class of his own, above every man. Okay, and then you have the men, and then you have the women. Okay, but Yahweh Shai was given a name and rank above all creation for a reason. The scriptures say, "Kiss the Son, lest he be angry." You go into that word "kiss," it means to reverence or to worship. So yes, we do acknowledge the Heavenly Father Yahweh, which is why we say Bahashem in the name Yahweh Shai. Okay, we reverence the Heavenly Father through Yahweh Shai, but we reverence Yahweh Shai as well. Okay, and those with the understanding, this should go without question. Okay, but let's get the original scripture I called for, Revelations 5 and 10. It says, I'll begin at verse 9. It says, "And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to the Most High by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and has made us unto our power kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." Okay, this is going to the power of Yahweh Shai. He was the only one that was worthy enough to open the seals of that book, which is the scriptures, to give us now that knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, to give us that ultimate comfort. Okay, so with that being said, let's go into how the house of David is going to ultimately restore true order. And we can close it with that, because prophecy says the house of David will restore order, rebuild the nation, and bring judgment to the heathen. And we can get that in one of my favorite books of the scriptures, okay, which is only one chapter and 21 verses, the book of Obadiah 1 and 18. And the headline reads, "The Salvation and Victory of Jacob." It says, this is a book of Obadiah 1, verse 17 and 18. It says, "But upon Mount Zion," okay, Mount, the government, Zion, to Zion in the Hebrew, which is a monument or memorial, okay, "shall be deliverance, and there shall be holiness, and the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions." Okay, so this says, but upon Mount Zion, so the government of Israel is ultimately going to receive that deliverance, that salvation. And we read in the headline, "The salvation and victory of Jacob." This has nothing to do with the other nations. Verse 18, "And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame." Okay, house of Jacob representing the southern kingdom, house of Joseph representing the northern kingdom, and the house of Esau for stubble. Esau, Edom, is the so-called white man who's currently in rulership, and they're currently in a downward spiral. Okay, they're circling the drain. This is the end of their rulership. It says, continuing on, "And they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh Shemashai has spoken it." Okay, so that's the end, or that's end time prophecy, I should say, but that's the end of Esau, Edom in rulership, and we're living in that time now. So when Israel, under the house of David, destroys Esau, Edom, and all the nations that oppress the Lord's people, they're ultimately going to rule in righteousness with the heathen in subjection. Okay, and we know, pursuing the prophecy, after 1,000 years, Esau, Edom's going to be destroyed. And these other nations are going to be given their lands, but they're always going to be in servitude and be tributaries unto the nation of Israel. And that's thus saith the Lord. Okay, so Lord willing, this lesson was edifying to the hopeful elect. I want to give all glory and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone who rule well. And peace and salutations to the hopeful elect who are continuing to fight and teach this thing of ours in truth and sincerity. This has been your brother Manatazak. Until the next lesson, Shalom.